It's not your savings rate. I researched why most retirees follow the 4% rule perfectly: build their emergency fund, pay off debt, and still run out of money. Turns out there's one number, your actual freedom number, that almost nobody sits down and calculates. And skipping it can cost you everything after 65. I went down a rabbit hole on the financial freedom steps that every advisor, every blog, every YouTube channel tells you to follow before and after retirement. What I found shook me. The advice isn't wrong exactly, it's just incomplete. And that missing piece, it's quietly wrecking retirement plans for people who did everything right. Let me show you what I mean. The 4% rule is probably the most repeated piece of retirement advice on the planet. The idea is simple: save up a big enough nest egg, withdraw 4% per year, and your money should last about 30 years. The math says you need a portfolio worth 25 times your annual expenses. Spend 50,000 a year, you need 1.25 million saved. Sounds clean? Sounds safe? But that rule was built on averages: average market returns, average lifespans, average inflation, and you are not an average. Nobody is. You're a specific person with a specific body and a specific cost of living in a specific city with specific health needs. The 4% rule doesn't know any of that about you. The rule traces back to financial planner William Bagan's 1994 research, which tested withdrawal rates against historical market data going back to 1926. His conclusion: that 4% per year was sustainable across a 30-year retirement in nearly every historical scenario, became the foundation almost every retirement calculator still uses today. But Bengen himself has since said the number may need revisiting. Longer lifespans, lower expected bond yields, healthcare costs rising faster than general inflation for decades running. The foundation the rule was built on has shifted underneath it. Now, here's where it gets dangerous. There's something called sequence of returns risk, and it's the silent killer of retirement portfolios. Say you retire, and in your first 2 or 3 years, the market drops hard. Not a crash of a lifetime drop, just a rough stretch. You're still pulling your 4% because you need to eat and keep the lights on, but now you're withdrawing from a shrinking portfolio. And even when the market recovers, your balance never fully catches up. You pulled too much from too little too early. Financial planners talk about this constantly. Most retirees have never heard of it until it's already happening to them. Here's why it's so damaging. A 30% loss doesn't get undone by a 30% gain. It takes closer to a 43% gain just to get back where you started. Now layer on in the fact that you were withdrawing throughout that loss period. The hole gets deeper faster than most people realize until they run a spreadsheet and actually see it. Then there's the longevity problem. People are living longer, a lot longer. Retire at 65, live to 95. That's 30 years. But what if you make it to 97, 100? The 4% rule wasn't stress test for that. According to data from the Society of Actuaries, a 65-year-old couple today has roughly a 50% chance that at least one of them lives past 90. That's not a rare outcome anymore. That's a coin flip. And one pattern keeps coming up. When retirees talk about what surprised them most, how badly they understood healthcare costs when they first ran their numbers, One bad diagnosis, one long-term care situation, and suddenly their perfectly planned 4% withdrawal rate is eating their portfolio alive. So sit with that for a second. The standard rule most people build their retirement around has cracks in it. Big ones, not the theoretical cracks, the kind that show up in real people's real lives, usually in their late 70s or early 80s, when there's little room to course correct. Now, let me walk you through how to calculate what actually matters, your real freedom number. And I'll come back to the one thing that protects it no matter what happens in the market. First, math. Your freedom number isn't a round figure you pull from a retirement calculator at 11 p.m. It's the actual capital required to fund your specific lifestyle for as long as you live. Now, what sounds reasonable? Not what your neighbor saved, what your life actually costs, multiplied out across the years you plan to be here. Now, and here's how you get there. Sit down and add up what you truly spend every month, not what you think you spend. What actually leaves your accounts, housing, food, insurance, gas, prescriptions, that streaming service you forgot you're paying for, all of it. The goal is brutal honesty because your retirement plan is only as accurate as the numbers you feed it. Charles Schwab has said it plainly. You have to know where you are before you can plan where you want to go. Sounds obvious until you realize how many people skip this step entirely. Once you have that real number, monthly number, multiply it by the number of months you need to cover. If you're 65 and planning to live to 90, that's 300 months. Planning to 95, 360 months. Now here's the part most people skip. Adjust that number for inflation. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks something called the Consumer Price Index for the elderly, specifically because older Americans spend a higher proportion of their income on health care, which inflates faster than general consumer prices. A dollar today won't buy a dollar's worth of prescriptions or specialist visits in 10 years. And add a cushion for healthcare surprises, because they're not surprises, they're certainties. It's just a question of when you do this math honestly, really honestly, your freedom number is almost always higher than you expected, sometimes meaningfully higher. That's uncomfortable, but it's real. And real is what keeps you safe. Think about it this way. Most people chase a generic target, $1 million, $2 million, without ever checking whether that number actually covers their life. That's like packing for a trip without knowing where you're going or how long you're going to be there. You might pack fine. You might pack completely wrong. You don't know until you're already there. Now, here's the part I promised I'd come back to. And honestly, this is the piece that changed how I think about all of this. Even if you calculate a perfect freedom number and still have a fundamental problem, a pile of money, no matter how big, only does one thing over time. It shrinks. Every withdrawal, every medical bill, every year of inflation chips away at it. You're spending down a fixed resource that never refills itself. That's the structure of the problem. And it's why financial planners who study retirement income sustainability consistently point to the same finding. Retirees who supplement their portfolio withdrawals with even a modest recurring income stream tend to fare significantly better than those who rely on portfolio drawdown alone. The reason is mechanical, not magical. When income is arriving from another source, you withdraw less from your investment accounts, less exposure to sequence of returns risk in the early years when it matters most. A smaller percentage of your portfolio liquidated during market downturns more time and more capital working to recover when the market eventually bounces back. That is what most financial freedom checklists never addressed. They'll tell you to save, invest, pay off debt, build an emergency fund, and all of that matters. But the list stops there. Nobody talks about what happens structurally when the pile starts shrinking and nothing is filling it back up. The retirees who stay financially stable aren't necessarily the ones who save the most. They're the ones who figured out how to keep some income flowing so their savings didn't have to shoulder the entire load. That changes the math in ways that compound quietly and powerfully over a 25 or 30-year retirement. So let me leave you with this. Know your real number, do the honest math, account for inflation, longevity, and healthcare costs, not as worst case scenarios, but as baseline planning assumptions. Then ask yourself one question. Do I have income that keeps arriving even if I stop working tomorrow? That question is worth sitting with. By the way, if you're serious about building that kind of recurring income, check out the turnkey residual income system at William Fever. You can earn up to $128 per customer in residual commissions, and there's a done-for-you sales system that handles the selling for you. Links in the description below. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.